Hey everyone. Uh, I'm sure I'm not the only person who's seen this video with the angry bagel guy, the angry bagel boss guy, whatever it's called. And, there are a lot of different things that come to mind when you watch this further. And it might seem like a non sequitur at first, but it all kind of ties in. There was a part of Hillary Clinton's book, What Happened, that I've thought about quite a bit. And it's a moment where she is going to law school, or she's trying to go to law school, and it's during the Vietnam War. And Hillary goes and is taking the test, taking the LSAT along with a bunch of other people, and all men. And one of the guys comes up to her and says, "Why are you even here? Why don't I could be sent off to war to die. Why are you here?" And in that book, I actually listened to the audiobook. It was clear the way it was presented, at least to me, that this was meant to be an example of how sexist everything was back then. How toxic all the men were, and how she was expected to just be this wife, and how regressive this man was for saying that she didn't have a right to be at that law school. And she did have a right to be at that law school, obviously. That said, I think this situation with the bagel guy, in a strange way, is a parallel to that style of thinking. So, an awful lot of people, problem is that he's an asshole, not that he's short. Well, first of all, I just saw some interviews with the guy, and it's more complicated than that. Like, he actually seems like kind of like a pretty nice guy, actually. But the man is 5 feet tall, and that has got to be so frustrating. Like, because it's true. Like, as is the case with that particular incident involving Hillary Clinton, let's go back and re-examine that again. The guy says in Hillary's story, "Why are you here? You don't need to be here. You could stay at home. If I don't get into the school, I will be sent to war, and I could die." Well, doesn't it seem a little odd that people look at that as a show of like what a sexist person is? Because that's an objectively true claim. If that dude, who's this terrible sexist or whatever, get into law school, he could be sent to war, drafted, forced to go to war, and he could die. Now, this says so much, and it says a lot about like the mentality, or sort of like the weird mentality that we have, like the difference between men and women when we're talking about equality and sexism and all this stuff. And I think that a lot of the conversations are really oversimplified. And it's also staggering to me the level of blindness to things like what I just mentioned. Hillary Clinton could only see it through the perspective of people are being sexist, that this man, this bad man, won't let me be in law school. He's this person who is she's fighting this patriarchal force, not realizing that that dude has a legitimate concern about not wanting to go overseas and fight and die in some stupid war. Something that Hillary would never have to deal with. So I think Bagel Guy, in the same way that there seemed to be such a blindness to what that guy was perhaps trying to communicate, however ungracefully and whatever, is if you sit down and see some interviews with him, a lot of things that he's saying are absolutely true. There are people who will, for all guys, but certainly a guy like that he's got to be so pent up and so frustrated. And the thing is that a lot of women I've noticed, if they think that there is this implicit thing that if they're not attracted to you in some way, or they don't think that you're above them in some way, they don't see a man as being, a man, they have utter contempt for them and are very dismissive of them, to the level where they might even, in the case of Hillary Clinton, or with the reaction to a lot of this Bagel Guy stuff, it immediately goes to, how am I the victim? How am I the victim? How is this evil, sexist guy? Instead of, looking at it from both sides, which is to say that Bagel Guy probably does have to deal with a lot of being looked at as lesser, and he probably does have a really hard time on dating sites or whatever it is. And it's interesting to me how little compassion there is for that dude. Now, in this time where we're all talking about equity and so on, why, I'm not saying anybody should feel one way or the other about, where we should be headed as a society. But I see a lot of entitlement all around. And I think that there is a point where equity or equality or creating a better system or whatever it is always seems to conveniently come down on somebody else doing something for you, rather than needing to make a sacrifice or realize that if you're going to have new rights, for example, like when women were now allowed to go to law school and so on, as they should have been, and I think it's good that Hillary went to law school. And that she had the fortitude to do that. And I'm sure it was tough for her to deal with all those guys. But again, I don't think that it makes any sense to be totally blind to what the man is trying to say. I guarantee you, it's not easy for that dude. Like, I'm 6 feet tall. And I used to be very, very, very shy. And I remember going a long time with no female attention whatsoever. Probably not because of the way that I looked not because I was too short, but because I was just very shy and awkward. And the thing is that with someone like me, if you do enough work, that can change. For someone like that dude, the most progressive feminist woman in the world, or well, it depends. I'm painting with a broad brush, but there are many people who would be so pro equity and all of this stuff that will only be willing to look at one side of the coin, will only be willing to look at the part of it, the part of equity that benefits them, instead of having a set of principles that give individuals certain rights and certain freedoms, but also has responsibilities and duties and sacrifices that go with it. It has long been baked into the cake that guys are expected to make certain sacrifices on the behalf of women and on the behalf of families and their country and all this stuff, and we're not supposed to complain about it either. And it seems like women kind of take that for granted. It's like, well, it really doesn't take that many men to, keep the species going. So we really do, in some sense, like look down, or men are more disposable. Like, it's not, I'm not, like, that's just like a biological fact. And there's a very good chance that that dude will never pass on his genes, that he will be seen as not good enough. And if you watch the reaction of some of the women there, they're just like, oh, this little shit. And there are a lot of guys who know what that feels like. Like, it honestly, if you're a dude, like this has happened to me. Like, if you're just being super awkward or like whatever, women don't just look at you like as if you are like they're not interested in you. You do get like, they have like disdain for you. It's like it's crazy, and it's a lot of it's a lot of pressure on guys, and there might be people saying, watching this saying, oh, wait, I'm not saying that it should be any different. I'm just saying, if we're going to start looking at what advantages people have based on certain immutable characteristics, and we're trying to, make things more equal, then we can't just be talking about the, metaphorically speaking, what it was like to be a woman in. We also in our minds what it must have been like to be a dude who had to go off to a war, kill a bunch of people, never get to talk about how it made him feel. All those dudes just drank when they. We have to recognize the fact that there are advantages and disadvantages to being both sexes. And I do think that I'm not saying, oh, well, women are so mean because they won't have sex with that guy, or like whatever it is, or they kind of like snicker at him. It kind of is what it is.